Hey, Bible read-along brothers and sisters. We are now ready for Unit 2 of E100. I'm glad that you finished the 5 readings in Unit 1. However long you're taking to do this, doesn't matter. You're on your own pace with this. You can do it over a year. You can do it over 100 days. But we hope that you're really beginning to feel what it's like to read the Bible regularly and systematically. Well, we're still in the book of Genesis this week, and we will be even into next week as well, because these narratives in this book are so important to the rest of the Bible. In the first part of Genesis that we focused on in the first unit, we saw foundational narratives, the story of creation and the fall, the story of the flood and deliverance from that, and the story of the Tower of Babel and how that serves as a kind of a paradigm of life in a fallen world. Well, we now move into the second part of the story, what we sometimes call the patriarchal stories, because they're about the patriarchs, the ancient fathers of the people of Israel, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Jacob's sons, the 12 sons of Jacob who become the progenitors of the 12 tribes of Israel, focused especially on Joseph. Well, these two sections of Genesis seem like they're very different, but they're linked together with a question and a promise. The question is, well, how is God going to do what he promised back at the beginning when he said the seed of the woman will crush the head of the snake? How is God going to become king of his world again? So that those pre-patriarchal narratives ended with the story of the Tower of Babel, where the nations are raging against one another in confusion because of their rebellion against God and the consequences that God brings upon them for that. So how is God going to address that? Well, the answer is he's going to bless those nations, and he says he's going to do that through Abraham and Abraham's seed. So Abraham is this interesting old man. He's childless, doesn't seem to be a particularly good guy, as we will see. But God says, through you, I'm going to bless all the families of the earth. Abraham and the other patriarchs, Isaac, Jacob, who we'll see, and Joseph and his brothers, who we'll see next week, they're very imperfect people. They often fail when put to the test, when their faith is put to the test, just as Adam and Eve failed. Just as Noah failed in that story that we read as well when we get to the end of that. And in particular, the patriarchs are going to fail because of their penchant for trickery, because of their impatience with God, sometimes because of their greed, sometimes because of their willingness to engage in sexual immorality or polygamy as a kind of a workaround when they are impatient. Well, God still works through them, not because he's indifferent to their sin, but because he is gracious. He is, through them, establishing a covenant. A covenant is a good biblical word. It's a little bit like our word contract, but we'll define it more specifically as the terms a king gives to his people by which he's going to rule. So God gives Abraham and his descendants a covenant saying, I am your king, this is how I will rule, and this is how you will respond. And that covenant involves a promise, the promise of the land that God will give to Abraham, the promise that he will make them a great nation, and ultimately the key promise is, through you I will bless all nations. Again, reversing the Tower of Babel. And so God works through their circumstances, not just to continue the covenant, but to teach them to rely on him, despite their penchant for evil, despite the habits that they have received intergenerationally and living in a fallen world as a fallen people. And he gives them an unusual right, the right of circumcision, the cutting off of the male foreskin. This is a sign that they belong to the covenant and so belong to God's promise, that they are different from other people. But that difference never means that they're better than other people, only that they are the ones who are called to bring the blessing that ultimately will go to all nations. So keep that promise in mind as you're reading, as you see these guys who are by no means spiritual heroes in 4 chapters out of 5, at the very least, who are failures like the rest of us. Notice how God is continuing his promise chapter after chapter, because that's going to carry us through to the New Testament and to what we have received in Christ.